Hello there, guys. How are you doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and welcome back to another Q&A. As you guys know, last week I put the call out on Twitter and on Facebook for you guys to ask me questions now that we live in a post-Nintendo Switch world. And it's interesting because I tried to frame it in the sense that, yes, it's a post-Nintendo Switch Q&A, but I didn't necessarily want it to be all Nintendo Switch questions, because I have done, like, Nintendo NX and Nintendo Switch-themed Q&As in the past, and those were really fun. That wasn't what this was supposed to be, but because I mentioned that, I'm pretty sure that's why almost every question is really just about the Nintendo Switch. And you know what? That's okay. That's what we all like talking about. It's what I like talking about. It's the big, hot, awesome thing happening right now, and so that'll just be a lot of fun. So with that being said, I will of course say, if you want to join in the conversation and join in the Q&As with me and everybody else, and potentially have yourself featured and get a shout out, you can of course follow me on Twitter or Facebook. You are invited to do so by checking out Rule of Two Review on either one of those social media sites, and you will, of course, find me. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. The first question today comes from a fellow Rob. This is Rob on Twitter, at XTRMRob. So, what is up, buddy? Thank you so much for being the first question of the day, and also thank you for having an amazing name. You're obviously a very handsome fellow. So, Rob asks me, do you think the Fire Emblem brand has become saturated at the cost of other possible games? Really excellent question, and I think that maybe a little bit that is true. And the reason is because I've been thinking in my brain about how Fire Emblem might relate to my favorite series, Metroid. And I know that sounds crazy, but what I've started to realize as we've seen Nintendo start to push the Fire Emblem brand and make it bigger and bigger and more important, and they've got 17 projects in the works. There's even a 3DS game still planned that looks really fantastic that I think comes out in literally like a month or two. I think that comes out right in the middle of spring or early summer, and the fact that they're doing so much with Fire Emblem, and then I started to think, as a Metroid geek, the fact that we haven't seen or heard anything from Metroid in a long time made me wonder, have they shifted a lot of their focus from other franchises that maybe haven't done what they've wanted to do into Fire Emblem because they've seen Fire Emblem be so successful, and now that it's even blowing up on the mobile market with Fire Emblem Heroes, it's like I don't even entirely blame them, because Fire Emblem is great, by the way. Let me just get that out. I do love Fire Emblem, so I'm happy to see the strong presence of the series from Nintendo. That makes me excited. But I have started to wonder, even though I believe a Metroid game is coming, I absolutely stand by that. They're making a Metroid game for the Switch. I 100% believe that. I do wonder if maybe when they started to shift resources to Fire Emblem maybe a year or two ago, and only now are we starting to hear about these projects, maybe that was also when they were like, well, we could be doing a Metroid game or an Animal Crossing game or whatever, F-Zero, and let's kind of just barely start the groundwork on those, but really let's focus on all these Fire Emblem projects. So, I guess I don't really know if Nintendo has enough staff and teams to be able to evenly distribute their work or not. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. With Metroid, we've even seen them kind of siphon that out to other developers, and so that could make it easier to develop alongside all the Fire Emblem stuff, but who knows? Either way, I think it's an interesting question. I think you pose a very, very good point here, and I think that maybe that's the case, but regardless, A, I believe Metroid is coming, and B, I definitely love to see all the Fire Emblem love coming from Nintendo. Next question, still coming from Twitter, comes from the Charizard King at Pokemadness 1996, a very busy, active, and vocal user on Rule of Two Review, so thanks, of course, for the question, buddy. And he asks me, now that you've had time with Zelda, is the DLC still worth it to you, and what games did you purchase? So he's referencing the fact that when the Zelda DLC was announced a couple of weeks before the game came out, I made a video discussing how I thought it was definitely weird. Never did I say it was bad. I think that there's probably a smart business move happening there, but it definitely felt weird. It still feels kind of weird, and I was making the case that I didn't think I was going to be interested in it, but I did mention I was going to wait to see if the DLC looked awesome, and I left myself open to be able to say, you know what, I do actually want to pick this up and check it out. And it's tough to answer the question because we still don't really know what the story elements of the DLC are going to be. So it's hard for me to say that, oh, the DLC itself looks good. But what I can say to answer your question is Breath of the Wild is so amazing and so much better than my already mammothly high expectations were. As a huge Zelda fan, that it's kind of hard for me to say that I wouldn't be interested in the DLC when it's ready to go, unless it looks super paper thin and just not substantial for the $20 that they're selling it for, which I don't think would be the case. I'm pretty much thinking that, yeah, I'll be willing to look into it, because once I'm finally done with this game, which I'm taking my time, but in the next month I'll probably finally decide to have it done, I'll be like, man, now the game is done, and that's sad. That would be really sad to me. And the idea of having story-related DLC, not items and things, but story to play through again a couple of months after I finished it, that definitely gets pretty exciting. So I'll be curious to take a look once it's ready. As to your other question, what games did I purchase? So far, the only games I have are Breath of the Wild and Fast Remix. But I'm definitely going to be picking up Snipper Clips pretty soon. I do want to grab Blaster Master Zero, and I'm looking forward to Mario Kart and Street Fighter and ARMS in the next couple of months. The next question from Twitter gets me really excited because I get to answer and give a special shout out to one of my personal friends in real life, which I always love having the opportunity to give special attention to my real actual friends. My homie from back in Denver when I used to live there, me and this guy go way back, my best friend. We've been roommates like 100 different times in a bunch of different apartments and stuff throughout the years, and it's really good to answer one of his questions on the channel. So my main man, Josh, a super awesome, very successful comedian back in Denver as well, my homie asked me a question. So what is up, Josh? I love and miss your face as always, and it's so interesting to be able to answer a question of yours on the video, which is kind of crazy. But either way, let's go ahead and see what Josh has to say. Mr. Skillman, what do you have to ask me? He says, may I have your Switch? Nope. Next question comes from another Brandon K at Twitter. He says, are you expecting more themes other than basic white and basic black? And yes, I am. At first, I was like, well, I don't really know why they would do that. I just feel like they're trying to keep it really simple with the Nintendo Switch. But then I reminded myself they ended up adding themes like that for the 3DS. Not only just from the menu of the 3DS could you change the color scheme, but then you could get like game-related schemes. And I had a theme. I had like a Sonic one for a while and different, things like that. So honestly, with what they're trying to do with the Switch and how they're trying to brand themselves and their games and the properties and all this stuff to a larger audience with the console, and the fact that it's a portable, I feel like they would be really missing an opportunity to be able to have those themes. I could see it being something that they would sell, so we might have to prepare to pay like $1.99 for like a Zelda theme or whatever. But, it is what it is. If they're really cheap, I would buy like a really kick-ass Metroid theme if they start doing that stuff. Other than that, worst case scenario, for sure they're going to offer different colors. I mean, once I saw people doing the black and then I found it myself, I was like, oh, that's cool. I can kind of change it up. I like the white and the black evenly, so I've gone back and forth a couple times. But, ultimately, to answer your question, yeah, I think that they'd be missing a real opportunity if they didn't offer that, so I do expect it. Next question is a really good one coming from Twitter, so I'm excited to answer this. This comes from George Woods at George Woods 3. He says, do you think a price drop for the Switch will come before decrease in manufacturing costs if sales start to slow? And then he adds, assuming a price drop happens. So it's a really interesting question. What he's saying is, if the Nintendo Switch slows down and it turns out that it isn't selling as well or as fast as Nintendo expects, which would really hurt them considering they just said they're doubling the amount of Switches they're making to 16 million units. But if that happens and they realize, oh god, the Switch isn't selling as well as it is and we might have to drop the price, but if that happens before the cost of creating the Switch drops, will Nintendo actually do that? And it's an important question because we all know that notoriously, Nintendo doesn't sell their consoles and products for a loss. They're very smart business-wise. Sometimes that can bite them in the ass, which is kind of what happened with the Wii U. They never dropped the price beyond that first $50 price cut after year 1 or 2. And it's because it probably still costs a lot of money to develop the Wii U and the gamepads, and they weren't willing to bite that cost for the sake of selling more consoles. So he's saying with the Switch, is this a situation where that might change? Because after a couple of years, if it becomes cheaper to develop the Switch, that might be when we see Nintendo start to drop the price. Which, to answer your second part of your question, George, I do think eventually, yes, the Switch will drop in price. That's going to happen at some point. But if that takes longer for the components of the Switch to become cheaper, but Nintendo really needs to start selling the Switch because it's slowing down, will they drop the price? And no, I don't think that they will. That's my honest answer. I think Nintendo will always stick to that principle. I think that they're still making a lot of money as a company. I think they're still generating a pretty solid profit. So if sales start to slow, I don't think that they're going to be like necessarily bleeding money in that respect. So I think that they could probably afford to try to stick to their guns, keep the price of the Switch at what it is, provided that it's still so expensive to create, and just say, hey, we have to start making it more appealing. Instead of dropping the price, we have to make the games library better. We have to make the marketing better. We have to show people why it's a great product. So I do think it's an interesting question, and one day we may get to the point where Nintendo is willing to sell a console at a loss, but I don't quite yet think we're there. And the way the Switch has been going so far, I feel like we're in pretty safe territory. So Personally, I don't see it happening. One of my favorite people to answer questions from on Twitter, Lil Cray to the Bone at LilCray99. What's up, buddy? Thank you for the question. He asks me, have you taken it out on the go, like to band practice or anywhere in public? And no, I have not yet done that. I have thought about taking it to work and kind of showing it off. I told that story recently, and I want to take it over to my buddies' houses or to band practice, because I tell all my bandmates how great it is, and they are all gamers, and it's like, you guys got to see this thing in person. But my big thing is, and I talked about this too, is I haven't gotten a case yet. And it's because cases have been freaking impossible to find. Even on Amazon, they've been sold out like crazy. And finally, I found one available. It wasn't a really great looking case, but it was something for like 12 bucks. And it finally was like available for pre-order like a week ahead of time. And I did purchase that. So I'm hoping in the next week or so, I actually get a case. And once I do, I'll be able to take my Nintendo Switch out with me on the go. Lil Cray to the Bone asks one more question. He says, have you licked the game card? No. Next from Twitter, the Blackbird64 at the Blackbird64 asks me, do you think it's better to buy a Switch or a PS4/Xbox One, assuming someone doesn't have any of those systems, if I could say your question correctly? That's a big question, actually, because I am a huge Nintendo fan, as you know, but I'm a huge Xbox and PlayStation fan. Like, I love all the consoles. I think they all have value and do unique things that are good and have really great games available across the board. Now, I love the Switch the most because it's a Nintendo console and because it does something pretty cool. The ability to be portable and take it on the go. It's a really sleek piece of tech, and it has Breath of the Wild, the best freaking game in the last 20 goddamn years. So it's like, those reasons alone would make me tell almost anyone, if they have no console but they want to get one, those huge bullet points make it worth getting a Switch. Plus, there are great games coming by the end of the summer, and then, of course, Mario Odyssey come winter and fall. And so that's a really big deal. That being said, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One do have bigger libraries. They do get that multiplayer multi-platform third-party support, and there are great games available through that on those consoles. So if somebody wants something just really simple and easy and they want to have access to all the big third-party games that come out there, they want Destiny, they want Call of Duty, they want Battlefield and Madden and things like that, I would be doing them a disservice if I didn't say, well, that's why you'd want those consoles. So it really depends on the person. I mean, blanket statement, I would want to tell most people to pick up a Switch because it's so great and it's Nintendo, but there are reasons why certain gamers and certain people might be better off with the PS4 or Xbox One first and a Nintendo Switch second. Sonic Man the Best at SonicMan4321 asks me an interesting question that I think I can decipher and is actually going to be kind of hard to answer. But he asked me, thank you so much for the question, man. You talk to me a lot on Twitter, which is really cool. And he says, if the Nintendo Switch is successful, will the Switch 2, or whatever it might end up being called, be successful compared to the fact that we assume a PlayStation hybrid console is also coming? So I kind of paraphrased it to put together what I think his question is saying. There was some patents that were released recently from Sony that showed a very similar device to the Nintendo Switch. So people are starting to wonder, is Sony going to do something very similar to what the Switch is in the next couple of years? A new portable that can also be attached easily to your TV and make it so you can do a lot of the same things. And then when he thinks about a Switch 2, they would all of a sudden become competing consoles in the same space doing the same thing. So I think, Sonic Man, that's what you're asking. And if that's the case, would the Switch 2 then be successful having a direct competitor using the same idea? Very good question. And I want to say yes, I do still think that Nintendo would be successful because Nintendo would be able to further push their portability, which they've been so strong in, and they've always killed it in the handheld market. And the Nintendo Switch is a great product that's doing well and making their name stronger, and I think that they'd be able to continue that hype and success into a Switch 2 that would hopefully be a better version of what the Switch idea is. And even if the PlayStation hybrid idea is true and turns out to be pretty freaking sweet, I think that both of those units can coexist harmoniously, especially if Nintendo keeps their marketing and their library strong. So it's a huge, random, completely fabricated scenario that might never play out. Nintendo's next console might not be a handheld hybrid, and Sony might not ever make a console handheld hybrid. So really, I mean, this whole thing is completely facetious. But if it happened, which isn't totally impossible, It would be interesting competition to see, but I do still think ultimately Nintendo could do okay. And now we're moving over to Facebook, which is really exciting because I fortunately get to feature a second excellent, best old school friend of mine from back home in Denver. Someone else who I also shared living spaces with many times in our younger days. So my other fantastic homie, Mr. Sean Purdy. What is up, buddy? So glad to hear from you on the channel. And he asked me a very good question. He says to me, now that you've experienced this launch title, which is of course the reason to own the system, which is very true, how do you see Nintendo maintaining excitement for future adopters? As great as Zelda is, some consumers will not be sold on one game or re-releases of older games. So, Sean, my man, thank you so much. Really good, well-formulated question. So, he's saying that right now Zelda's the only reason to buy a Switch. And there are a lot of people who maybe even recognize Zelda's a great game and they want to play it, but still might not be enough of a reason to buy the Switch. And then, of course, you got Mario Kart, a port of an older game. You've got some third-party games that are going to be really great, but they've already released on the other consoles last year. Games like Steep and Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 and Skyrim and whatnot. And so how will they make it exciting for other gamers who aren't impressed by those things? Good question. And it's as simple as furthering their library. And they need to push the fact that ARMS is a brand new IP that hopefully is going to be very good. Splatoon 2 is going to be incredible for the online multiplayer scene. And of course, Mario Odyssey is going to sell the system to a lot of people by the end of the year as well. Xenoblade 2 is an important title because there's a huge swath of gamers that are that RPG heavy and JRPG heavy kinds of gamers. And if they see that that kind of content is going to come to the Switch with games like that, Dragon Quest XI, is it the Atlas's Persona game or the Shin Megami Tensei game, whatever it is that they showed at the Tokyo event. I know it was one of those two series. You know, that's coming to the Switch. They need to really market all of these great games that are coming first and third party alike. And beyond that, they need to show us that 2018 is also going to be a great year for games. Because I think 2017, even without no new game announcements, is an awesome launch year for a console, of any kind of console, Nintendo or otherwise. But that second year is where we need to see if Nintendo can really bring it, because they've struggled with that in the past. They really did well in 2014 with the Wii U, but it didn't make a difference. We need to see that other games, like third-party games and great first-party games, are coming. They need to show us a Metroid. That is going to be huge if they can show us that series. So if they keep the library solid, they market correctly, and they show us 2018 is also going to be kick-ass with games, and I think that will solve the problem and hopefully get the people who are on the fence about the Switch willing to run out and buy one. Next question on Facebook comes from Craig Whitney. Craig Whitney asks me, Rob, do you keep your Switch always docked? And if so, in sleep mode or with it powered off? The reason I ask is I'm concerned with the Switch always being in sleep mode while docked could cause some long-term damage to the Switches, battery, and Joy-Cons due to overcharging. Have you thought at all about this as a potential issue? So no, I had not thought about it until you asked me that question. So thank you for the question, Quag. Thanks, Quag. Thanks for the question, Craig. It's a good question, and I like that you brought that idea up to me. So I kind of researched it a little bit because I do think that there could potentially be something to the idea of overcharging in sleep mode doing damage to the components. And what little bit I've been able to find from people who understand the tech is, way better than I do, is I don't think there's any initial reports that could do some damage, because I believe the way the Switch's hardware is designed, brilliantly by the way, is that sleep mode and powered off mode are ultimately the same thing. I don't think there's actually a huge difference, other than the fact that you have to reboot your game when you turn on the Switch from powered off mode, but it all moves so seamlessly from one application to another profile, to on, to off, to sleep, to off. I don't think that there's really a big difference. So I don't think that there's an extreme case of overcharging happening when it's docked, but in sleep mode. So maybe that proves to be wrong, and hopefully we don't hear a year from now that actually it has been doing damage. And if so, Nintendo will have to address it at that time, and hopefully a bunch of us aren't out a lot of money. Because right now, the best way to operate the Switch is to keep it, when you're docking it, is to keep it in sleep mode. It's great. It's super, super convenient. Other than that, I thought, to answer the first part of your question, I thought I was always going to keep this docked when I got it. But honestly, I love taking this thing out of the dock. Even though I haven't taken it out of my house, I freaking love moving to different rooms in my house and sitting on my couch or in the bed. When my girlfriend and I go to sleep, sometimes I just sit in bed and I'm just playing it. And like, you could kind of do it with the Wii U, and that was cool, but it didn't feel the same, and I never really used it with the Wii U. But I actually like it with the Switch. You know, that being said, I mostly do keep it on my TV because it's awesome on my 50-inch TV. All right, winding down here, last couple of questions, guys. Patrick McNamara asks me, what other Nintendo franchises would you like to see take the open world sandbox models? Also, what is your favorite weapon to use in the new Zelda? So the only thing I'll say about the Zelda weapon thing at the last part of your question is I don't really have a favorite weapon. I can just say my favorite type of weapon is one-handed weapons. There are so many two-handed weapons in this game, and it's like kind of frustrating. I like having one or two in my arsenal, but it's harder to find the one-handed weapons, and I kind of like just having a sword. And I have a whole long thing about the weapon system in Zelda that I need to talk about on a video, the good and the bad, because there's some very bad with it as well. Even though overall I love the game, it's a 10 out of 10, don't get me wrong. There's a lot with the weapon thing I need to talk about. But overall, I'll just say I love one-handed weapons the most. And I do actually really like the spears. Those are pretty fantastic as well, even though they're weak. What other franchises would I like to see take the open world sandbox? I have one really easy and obvious answer, and it's Metroid. I think Metroid could work, and I've thought this for a long time, in the open world sandbox space. And if you look at what the Metroid Prime games did, those 3 games, they were open world-esque to a degree. Obviously not the same way. There's a lot of loading in different sections of maps. It's not a huge, big sandbox. But it really was a huge world and map they gave you in those games. And you could go anywhere and do anything at any given time. You know, even if you didn't want to do, like, the main purpose of, you know, your next step in the actual gameplay and the story. But, you know, if they wanted to take it to the actual sandbox model where it's just a big world and where there are things like side quests and NPCs, I think that could work great in a Metroid universe, preferably in third person. I know everyone wants first person to continue, and I would like that, but I think a third person sandbox Metroid game could be absolutely fantastic. And I think that Nintendo right now are showing how dedicated they are to making kick-ass games. And if the same Nintendo team, excuse me, if the same Nintendo team responsible for Breath of the Wild moved to Metroid and made that happen, oh my god, you guys, that would just be so fantastic. So, easy answer, man. For me, it's Metroid. Okay, we're going to move to the last question of the day, also from Facebook, from another good friend of mine and good friend of the channel, Brian Haney. He asks me, would you recommend Breath of the Wild for Wii U for those who may not be able to get the Switch anytime soon? So, I mean, yeah, it'd be silly, I think, not to recommend the game for the Wii U. I've yet to play it on the Wii U, but all accounts are that it's basically the same game. It looks slightly less good, and Nintendo confirmed that some of the soundscape isn't quite as varied and, you know, crystal clear, pristine sounding as it is on the Nintendo Switch, because the Switch is a more powerful machine. But, I mean, that game would be good if you could play it on your phone. It would be good if you could play it on the original Game Boy. It would be good if you could play it on an old 1980s Apple computer. They could do anything to that game, and it would still be the best freaking experience ever. So, Brian, I know you're a big Xbox guy, but you do enjoy Nintendo to a degree. I'm assuming you must have a Wii U, which I didn't think you did. But if you have a Wii U, and you're struggling to find a Switch out there, and you just gotta play Zelda, I would say, yeah, man, just pick it up. It's the same game, same quest, same open world, same amazing gameplay and puzzle solving and dungeon hunting and all this stuff. It's so freaking good. And it's going to be beautiful even on the Wii U. I mean, we already know that, so I really wouldn't stress it too much. There isn't any reason in the world I could think to not recommend any version of Breath of the Wild to any gamers. So, dude, I definitely say you just pick that up. Alrighty, guys, and that's it for the post-Nintendo Switch Q&A from myself and Rule of Two Review. I try to get to as many questions as it made sense to fit into a video. There were several I could not get to, so if I did not answer your question, I am super sorry, but always keep trying every time I put a call out for questions, which I do every, I don't know, 3 or 4 months or so. I like to do a Q&A and interact with you guys and give you shout outs and answer your questions. It's so much fun. My favorite videos to do. So thank you again so much to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to my main homies, Josh and Sean, from back home for asking some questions. Josh, I am not going to give you my Switch. Get out of here with that shit. Go buy your own. And I think that's going to be it for this one, man. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for asking questions. Again, feel free to follow Rule of Two Review on Twitter or Facebook if you want to be involved in these in the future. So that's it for now, guys. Keep on enjoying your Nintendo Switches. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you all next time on another video.